Good morning, everyone. Whew. So, how many of you have ever read or watched the Left Behind series? Lots of you guys have. Awesome. I remember I picked them up when I was in high school, and I read about halfway through the series, and then I just got bored because I realized nothing actually is happening anymore. They just progress so slowly. Anyway, not a critique of those books at all, but those are probably some of the more popular books on end times in the last while, at least in Christian circles. But Christians aren't the only people who are interested in apocalyptic stories. It seems like our world now more than ever is interested in the end of the world, whether that's stories about nuclear war that wipes out everybody, or climate change, or a deadly virus. There's lots and lots of books and movies that depict all three, or sometimes a combination of all those. And all of those options are usually pretty terrifying and pretty terrible. So although in those scenarios usually there's a remnant who live on and have to rebuild civilization afterwards, but we have all these different stories about what the end is going to look like. And so it's important for us to know, what does the Bible actually say about these things? So last week, Phil talked about facing persecution and living a life that is worthy of persecution. So today we're going to look a little bit more towards the future and see what does God say about where humanity is going and how we should act. So first part's going to be a little bit more study, and then we're going to talk about how does this apply to our lives now. So first, what does the Bible say about where we're going? Now, before we get into this, I should preface this that we, as members of the AGC, the Associated Gospel Churches, believe in something called premillennialism. So I'm going to read Revelation 20, and we're going to read verses 1, 2, and 3, which says, "Then I saw an angel coming down from heaven, holding in his hand the key to the bottomless pit and a great chain. And he seized the dragon, that ancient serpent, who is the devil and Satan, and bound him for 1,000 years, and threw him into the pit, and shut it, and sealed it over him, so that he might not deceive the nations any longer, until 1,000 years were ended. After that, he must be released for a little while." So we're going to put a couple different graphs on the screen. So there's a couple different main views that Christians have believed on the end times. So we're going to start with, should be amillennial somewhere there. Yeah. So amillennials believe that we're in the church age, Christ reigns in our hearts, and then Satan is bound, and then at some point coming soon, Jesus returns, and the new heaven, new earth. Then post-millennial is very similar, except they believe that basically the world progressively gets better and better and better until Christ comes. And then premillennial is the other one, and this is what we believe as the AGC. But that millennium, you'll see, is we believe it's after that second coming. So we're pre-millennial. We're living before the millennial. And then there's also, before the second coming, there's the whole tribulation and all that kind of stuff. Tribulation, rapture in there. So I just wanted to talk about that just quick, just to say, like, there are different views amongst Christians, and we believe that just because you don't believe exactly what we do doesn't mean you're not a Christian. There's lots of faithful men and women of God who have believed all three. But this is what we believe as the AGC churches, and it's important because it changes how you read certain passages of Scripture. But I also want to say that if you disagree, you're still a Christian. That's fine. So you can turn that off, and we'll move on. So we're going to be bouncing around in our Bibles a little bit this morning, so we can start turning to Matthew. We're going to read Matthew chapter 28. So this is likely a fairly familiar passage in the Bibles, but we're going to read Matthew 28, verses 18 to 20. These are some of Jesus' final instructions to his disciples, which says, and Jesus came and said to them, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you. And behold, I am with you always, even to the end of the age. So here we hear this kind of fairly often in the church. This is our mission as a church. This is what God has told us to do, to go out and make disciples of all nations. This is why we do what we do. This is why we support missions organizations like Stony Lake Bible Camp, because they help do that in our community. And what does making disciples mean? He highlights two things that are very important there: baptizing them and teaching them to obey what God has told us to do. This is what our mission is. This is what we are called to do, make disciples. So it's a big mission. There's a lot of people in the world. So you could ask the question, like, are we ever actually going to do that? Are we ever going to accomplish this mission? So let's turn back, Matthew 24, verse 14. This is, there is kind of Matthew 24, Mark 13, and Luke 21 all kind of talk about the same instance. And so here Jesus is telling them about some of the things that will happen in the last days. And here he says, 24:14 says, and this gospel of the kingdom will be proclaimed throughout the whole world as a testimony to all nations, and then the end will come. So just looking at these two verses, you might think that, well, God sent us on a mission, right? Go tell the world about him, and then we're going to complete that mission, right? According to that verse, there will be a time where every person will have heard the gospel or an opportunity to. And that's pretty awesome. That's pretty amazing. God is empowering his church to do exactly what he has called us to do. There will be a time where the gospel spreads. And now we might think that will mean that the world will slowly become like this Christian utopia. We'll all be sitting around in circles singing Kumbaya, and then God will just come on in and it'll be great. But unfortunately, that's not what God seems to say will happen. Let's turn, or I'll just quickly mention Matthew 24, those three passages I mentioned, Matthew 24, Mark 13, Luke 21. It's called the Olivet Discourse. And so there's a couple different things that Jesus says will happen. And so some of them are, there's false prophets will rise up, Christians will be killed, sin will increase. But we're going to turn to 2 Timothy, a passage that was read earlier. 2 Timothy 3. We're going to read verses 1 to 7. Once I get there. There we go. But understand this, that in the last days there will come times of difficulty, for people will be lovers, will be self-lovers. For people will be lovers of self, lovers of money, proud, arrogant, abusive, disobedient to their parents, ungrateful, unholy, heartless, unappeasable, slanderous, without self-control, brutal, not loving good, treacherous, reckless, swollen with conceit, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God, having the appearance of godliness but denying its power. Avoid such people, for among them are those who creep into households and capture weak women, burdened with sins, and led astray by various passions, always learning and never able to arrive at a knowledge of the truth. So here we have Paul telling Timothy what kind of stuff will happen in the last days. So Paul is fairly clear, like, hey, Timothy, things are going to get worse. This is the kind of stuff that you can expect to see continue to grow in the future. Tough times are ahead. Be ready for that. And we could also talk about Revelation. There's lots of stuff in there about the intense time of catastrophe that is upcoming. And so we see throughout the Bible, and there's other places as well, where God warns his people that tough times are ahead, tough things are coming. So why would God tell us this? Like, what's the purpose of him warning the church that things are going to get worse? Right? Is it so that we can be pessimistic about the government and the world that we are in? Or is it so that we can hoard supplies and make a comfy little castle away from everyone else? Or is it so that we can say, well, I believe that I'm going to be raptured and I'm not going to be here, so this is your problem, not mine? Or is it so that we can be scared of what's going to happen? Luckily, a lot of these passages, God does tell us this is what to expect and this is what you should do. So we're going to look at a couple of the parables. So we're going to turn back to Matthew. So just after kind of where we were looking at before, Matthew 25. And this is where we're going to kind of camp for the rest of the sermon. So here we have two parables that Jesus talks about in connection with what kind of the end times that he's been talking about before. So we're going to read Matthew 25, 1 to 30. It says, "And the kingdom of heaven will be like 10 virgins who took their lamps and went to meet the bridegroom. 5 of them were foolish and 5 were wise. For when the foolish took their lamps, they took no oil with them. But the wise took flasks of oil with their lamps. As the bridegroom was delayed, they all became drowsy and slept. But at midnight there was a cry, 'Here's the bridegroom, come out and meet him.' Then all those virgins who rose and trimmed their lamps. And some foolish said to the wise, 'Give us some of your oil, for our lamps are going out.' But the wise answered, saying, 'Since there will not be enough for us and for you, go rather to the dealers and buy some for yourselves.' And while they were going to buy, the bridegroom came, and those who were ready went in with him to the marriage feast, and the door was shut. Afterwards, the other virgins came, saying, 'Lord, Lord, open to us.' But he answered, 'Truly I say to you, I do not know you. Watch therefore, for you know neither the day nor the hour. For it will be like a man going on a journey, who called his servants and entrusted to them his property. To one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, and to another 1, to each according to his ability. Then he went away. He who had received the 5 talents went at once and traded with them, and he made 5 talents more. So also he who had the 2 talents made 2 talents more. But he who had received the 1 talent went and dug in the ground and hid his master's money. Now after a long time the master of those servants came and settled accounts with them. And he who had received the 5 talents came forward, bringing 5 talents more, saying, 'Master, you delivered me 5 talents? I have made 5 talents more.' His master said to him, 'Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a little. I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master.' And he also who had 2 talents came forward, saying, 'Master, you delivered me 2 talents? Here, I've made 2 talents more.' His master said to him, 'Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a little. I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master.' He also who had received the 1 talent came forward, saying, 'Master, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you did not sow, and gathering where you scattered no seed. So I was afraid, and I went and hid your talent in the ground. Here, you have what is yours.' But his master answered him, 'You wicked and slothful servant. You knew that I reap where I have not sown, and gather where I scattered no seed. Then you ought to have invested money with the banker, and at my coming I would have received what was my own with interest. So take the talent from him and give it to the one who has 10 talents. For to everyone who has, more will more be given, and he will have an abundance. But from the one who has not, even what he has will be taken away. Cast the worthless servant into the outer darkness. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth." So 2 stories. So the first, we have 10 ladies who have been, they would have been in something kind of like a wedding party. And half of them, they're ready to go, and the other half are not. So when the groom shows up, only half of them go to the wedding. The other half, they don't. They go and try to get some oil, and then when they get there, the groom says, "Sorry, I don't actually know who you are." And at that point, we're told to keep watch. And in fact, there's multiple times that we're told to keep watch in those passages that we've looked at so far. And then parable 2, we see 3 servants, each given a different amount of money or talents. 2 of them use their talents and end up doubling their money. The last one does nothing. He just buries it, waits till his master come back. And the 2 who use their talents get rewarded, and the last one just makes excuses, accuses the master of being harsh, and that he was afraid of him, but the master points out that if you were actually afraid of me, you would have actually put it in the bank. So it seems like you weren't actually afraid, you just actually didn't really care. It doesn't seem like he was scared because he didn't try to make the master happy. The implication is that this servant didn't care for his master at all. He couldn't be bothered to make his master a profit because that would be work. He would rather blame the master, say it's your fault, and actually, rather than being obedient. And it's because of that attitude that the servant is thrown into hell. Now, both of these parables have sad endings, but they don't have to leave us discouraged. So both of these parables, there's 2 different kind of people. So we'll start with the bad guys. There's the foolish young ladies who know their groom is going to be coming at some point, but do they get ready for him? Do they like, oh, we should get stuff ready so that when he shows up, we can go and be with him? No. They were too busy just doing their own thing. They couldn't be bothered to get some oil. They knew, hey, there's a wedding coming up. Do we want to be there? Not really. And then the second one, there's a last servant who he wasn't concerned about pleasing his master. He didn't want to share the profits with him. And so both of these characters, their actions show what they actually care about. They actually don't care about the bridegroom. They actually don't care about their master. They don't want to do the things that will please him. They just want to do their own thing and then expect to join in on the rewards after. And the master tells them, in essence, like, you guys didn't actually love me. You just loved the idea of me. You lived your life for yourself, and you knew of me. You didn't actually know me. And so maybe you've grown up in church, and maybe you just try to be a good person. Maybe you would attend church most weeks. None of that really matters in terms of being saved. None of that can save you. The only thing that makes us right in the eyes of God is Jesus and believing in him. And it's not just like fire insurance that you can put on your back pocket and take out when you need it, like a Monopoly card, like, oh, I'm in jail. Oh, look at that. I got a card I can get out. So we're good to go. When you believe in something, right, it changes you. God changes you. And so God is here saying, hey, this world will not last forever. There will be a time coming when this earth will end, and there will be many discouraging things that come, right? The world's going to get tougher. Tough times are ahead, but keep watch. So what does Jesus mean, though, when he says, keep watch? What did the woman and the servants do that was good? They got ready. They obeyed. They did what they knew would please the master. They lived like the one that they loved was actually coming back. And so, church, things are going to get harder. God has warned us about that. But Jesus has not warned us to be discouraged so that we could be discouraged. He wants to encourage us to keep going. We could easily say, well, if things are going to get worse, why even try? But may it never be said of us that things got worse in our world because we didn't do anything or because we actually participated in making it worse. I want to read, I'm going to go back just quick to 2 Timothy 3, and we're going to read 13, verse 13 and 15. It says, while even evil people and impostors will go on from bad to worse, deceiving and being deceived. But as for you, continue in what you have learned and have firmly believed, knowing from whom you learnt it, and how from childhood you have been acquainted with the sacred writings, which are able to make you wise for salvation through faith in Christ Jesus. So Paul tells them, like, things are coming, people are going to get worse and worse. That's what they're doing. This is what I want you to do. Continue on in the things that you have learned. Keep following God. Keep doing the things that you're doing. Keep being faithful. Don't give up. What you do now may impact the world forever. Just because things likely will get worse does not mean that you have permission to just give up. Take your hands off the wheel. Well, whatever. God is still at work in you and through you. We're not told to rise up and fight. We're not told to throw up our hands and say, not my problem, to sit back and relax. We're not told to spend your money on things that you enjoy or just relax and enjoy your life. We're told, keep doing the things that you've been taught. Keep obeying God. Now, sometimes we can look at these parables, right? The people when God comes back and he sees people doing things, they're rewarded. And so we can sometimes think that, like, well, I need to do stuff so that when God comes back, he approves of me. Almost like we need to do stuff in order to earn God's approval, but that's not the point. And we can never do enough for God to accept us. We can never do enough to earn God's love. We don't earn salvation. That's all done by Jesus. Right? We don't obey out of duty. We obey out of love. And the cool thing is about the parable of the talents is that we see the servants didn't earn their original money on their own. They were given their talents by God, by their master. And they get to go and use those talents to earn more. And you can almost, in the way it's written, you hear them, when the master comes back, they're excited. Like, Master, look, I took what you gave me and I doubled it. And it was awesome. Like, if you invested some money and a short time later, you doubled your money, I mean, I would be pretty excited. Like, man, this is awesome. And it's similar in the gifts and talents that we have been given, right? God has given them to us not just to sit in the ground and rot. He's given them to us to use. And it's an awesome thing to do. Like, there's so much joy and excitement and passion to be found in obeying God and doing the things that he has called us to do, obeying him. If you're ever wondering, like, man, I just sit and learn and listen and don't do much with him, and you wonder why is my walk with God seems so dry, maybe it's because you're not actually putting into practice the things that you have learned. Because I've found that when you put into practice the thing that you're learning about, that's when the joy and excitement comes. Not just from learning, but also doing the things that you have learned. So as we are faithful and use the gifts and talents that God has blessed us with, we'll likely be rewarded, not necessarily in the form of money, like in the parable, but we will experience a joy of walking more and more closely with God. There is a tremendous amount of joy in serving God, both now and in the future. So I want to end with a story that I heard this past week. So this past week, most of our youth leaders, sorry, I got a little tickle in my throat. This past week, most of our youth leaders went to a retreat, a youth workers conference in Saskatoon. And one of the sessions was an interview with a woman named Kyla Gillespie. So Kyla grew up in a Christian home. She made it to the women's Olympic hockey team, but she struggled with who she was. Sorry. She ended up engaging in relationships that the Bible says is wrong. And she then became a different person and took medicine so that people would see that she was a different person. And then throughout this time, she was also an alcoholic. And she wasn't doing great, but she ended up meeting with her old pastor, who got her into a Christian rehab facility. And through the faithful love and care of the workers in that program, but especially the pastor and his wife, she returned to following God. And now, early in that journey, there was a lady who prayed for her, and during the prayer, she said something about a pearl, and Kyla didn't really know what in the world that meant. That she thought maybe like God was telling her that she's really special and precious like a pearl. And so it's like, oh, okay, cool. But she kind of just filed that in her brain and then kind of forgot about it. And then fast forward a little bit, Kyla was still presenting as a different person, and she wasn't sure if she could go back to being Kyla. And she was wrestling with the decision of what to do. And then the wife of her pastor came and said to her that God had laid it on her heart to tell her that he's the pearl. She had never heard the story or heard what that lady had said, but she said this lady came and she said, I feel like God's been telling me to tell you that he's the pearl. And so she flashbacks to this prayer, and she realized that God was telling her that he was the one who's amazing, who's worth giving everything up, who's precious, not necessarily her. He was telling her that he is worth everything. There's a parable very similar to that of the pearl that you give everything up for. And so Kyla was kind of overwhelmed by emotion, and now Kyla is Kyla, and she sounds quite a bit different than she used to. But she gave that up because she realized that God is worth it, and she believes that God is worth everything I have, and so I can give up who I am because he's by far worth it. And so, church, that's really what this boils down to. Is Jesus worth it? Hey, do you love him? Not perfectly, because none of us will love God perfectly. But do you love him? When we talk about things getting harder and Christ returning, we can think that I have to do enough, I need to do enough good things, or I need to tell more people, but if you just act out of duty, it's not really worth much. Instead, we should keep watch, keep looking forward, because we know that the one we love is coming back, and we can't wait to be with him. Because if you do that, when God comes back, you'll be ready. Like, sweet, I've been looking forward to this day for so long. It's not scary. It's not intimidating at all. You're like the 10 young ladies who wait for the bridegroom to come, like, awesome, we've been waiting for you. You don't fear the future because you know that God's got me and I get to be with him. You'll be living on this earth looking forward for Jesus to come back. It doesn't matter how things are going on because you know the one who you serve. There is an end coming, and that's awesome. Because while we may experience hardship, it won't last forever. God tells us this stuff not so that we'll be discouraged, but so that we'll remember the prize that we get. We'll remember that he is worth it. So I hope that although things may get worse, that although tough times may come, that you remember that you have a prize coming, that you have the Savior is coming back, the one whom you love, and the one who we get to experience the joy of serving forever and now. And so, the only reason that we can look forward to Jesus coming back is because Jesus is the one who paid the punishment that we deserve. And we're all sinners deserving of death, deserving of hell, but Jesus lived a perfect life and died on the cross to take the punishment that we deserve, so that when God looks at us now, he doesn't see the sinner that we are. When God looks at us now, he sees a perfect, sinless person, which doesn't make any sense. But it's the amazing gift that God has blessed us with. And so Jesus dying on the cross is the only reason we can look forward to Jesus coming back. And so we're going to celebrate that today. We're going to have communion. So I'm going to call the elders up. And so we're going to pass around the bread and the juice and remember the wonderful sacrifice that God has done for us. And as we remember that, we can look forward to the time when Christ will come once again. So we're going to pass this stuff out, and then we'll partake together.